Dennis Brewer sat alone in the hospital corridor, hands trembling as he stared at the examination room door. If the results came back bad, he had no idea how he would afford treatment for his daughter Sophia. Fear was swallowing him whole when a woman in an expensive red dress suddenly sat down beside him. She was polished, powerful, clearly someone important, but her voice cracked when she leaned close to his ear. "Tell them I'm your wife. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you are tuning in from. We love seeing how far our stories travel." He turned to look at her, a stranger, desperate. Maria Schreiber, the CEO whose face was on billboards across Chicago. Why would a woman like that beg a hospital janitor she had never met? Then he saw it, the same terror in her eyes that he carried every day, the fear of losing a child. And he understood. This wasn't about wealth or status. This was about survival. So he nodded, and the lie that would change both their lives began. Dennis had been sitting in the pediatric oncology waiting room at Northwestern Memorial Hospital for 2 hours. He was wearing his janitor coveralls because he had come straight from his shift. He could not afford to take time off work, not with Sophia's medical bills piling up, not with rent due in a week. Sophia was 8 years old. She had been sick for 3 months. First it was tiredness, then bruising that would not go away, then the nosebleeds. The doctor had ordered tests, blood tests, bone marrow tests, tests that made Dennis's stomach turn every time he thought about them. Today was the day they would get results, the day that would tell Dennis if his daughter had leukemia or something else, the day that would determine if he could afford to save her life. Dennis did not look like much. He was 34 years old, but looked older. 3 years of grief and worry had aged him. His hands were calloused from years of mopping floors and cleaning hospital rooms. His coveralls were faded and stained. He was invisible, just another hospital worker that people walked past without seeing. But Dennis had not always been invisible. Before Sophia, before his wife died, before he became a janitor, Dennis had been someone else entirely. He had been an elite operative, the kind of man governments called when situations required silence and precision, the kind of man who could disappear into any environment and complete any mission. But that life ended when his wife, Sarah, died in a car accident 3 years ago. Dennis had walked away from everything. The missions, the danger, the purpose. He had taken Sophia and disappeared into the most ordinary life he could find. A hospital janitor in Chicago. A single father trying to raise a daughter alone. He thought being invisible would keep them safe. He thought if he stayed quiet and worked hard and never drew attention, they would be okay. But cancer did not care about invisibility. Dennis was staring at the examination room door when Maria Schreiber sat down next to him. He did not recognize her at first. She was wearing an expensive red dress that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her blonde hair was styled perfectly. She looked like she belonged in a boardroom, not a hospital waiting room. But then Dennis saw her face. He saw the fear, the same raw terror he had been feeling for months. And he knew she was there for the same reason he was. A child, a sick child, a parent's worst nightmare. Maria did not say anything at first. She just sat there gripping her purse with white knuckles. Dennis went back to staring at the door. 2 strangers sharing the same hell. Then Maria's phone buzzed. She looked at it, and her whole body went rigid. Dennis saw her hands start to shake. She looked toward the lobby entrance like she was seeing a ghost. Dennis followed her gaze. An older woman was walking into the waiting room. She was in her 60s, wearing an expensive coat, and carried herself like she owned the building. Behind her was a man in a suit, carrying a briefcase. A lawyer. Dennis recognized the type immediately. Maria whispered a curse under her breath. Then she turned to Dennis with desperate eyes. She told him her name was Maria Schreiber. She told him the woman walking toward them was her stepmother. She told him the stepmother was trying to take her son, trying to prove Maria was unfit, trying to claim she was isolated and alone and could not provide a stable home. Maria told Dennis that if her stepmother saw her sitting alone in a hospital waiting room, it would be proof. Proof that Maria had no support, no family, no husband, and the stepmother would use it to take everything. Then Maria grabbed Dennis's hand. Her grip was desperate. She looked into his eyes and said the words that would change everything. "Tell them I'm your wife." Dennis looked at this stranger, this powerful CO who probably had everything he did not: money, status, security. But in that moment, she had nothing. Just fear, just desperation, just a mother trying to protect her child. Dennis understood that. He had been living it for months. He looked toward the lobby. The stepmother was getting closer. The lawyer was scanning the room. They were hunting, looking for weakness, looking for proof. Dennis made a decision. The same kind of decision he used to make in his old life. Fast, instinctive, based on reading a situation and choosing action over hesitation. He squeezed Maria's hand back. He told her okay. He would do it. Maria's eyes filled with tears, relief and gratitude, and something else Dennis could not name. She squeezed his hand tighter and whispered thank you. The stepmother reached them. She looked at Dennis with cold eyes, taking in his coveralls, his callous hands, his ordinary face. She looked at Maria like she had caught her in a lie. She asked Maria who this was. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were sharp, cutting, judging. Maria straightened her shoulders. She lifted her chin, and she introduced Dennis as her husband. The stepmother's smile did not reach her eyes. She looked at Dennis again, slower this time, looking for cracks, looking for proof that this was a lie. But Dennis had spent years pretending to be people he was not, years blending into environments, years controlling every micro-expression on his face. So he looked the stepmother in the eyes and smiled. Not too warm, not too cold, just a tired husband supporting his wife in a hospital. The stepmother asked how long they had been married. Maria said 2 years. Quietly, Dennis nodded and added that they kept it private because of Maria's work. The lawyer wrote something down. The stepmother's smile tightened, but she did not challenge them. Not yet. She just said she would be checking on Maria's son later, making sure he was getting proper care, making sure Maria was capable. Then she walked away. The lawyer followed, and Dennis and Maria sat there holding hands like their lives depended on it, because maybe they did. The next 3 days were the longest of Dennis's life. He was living 2 lives at once, pretending to be Maria's husband, pretending he was not terrified about Sophia's test results. The hospital became his entire world. He still wore his janitor coveralls during his shifts, but after work, he changed into the clean clothes Maria had bought him, a simple button-down shirt, dark pants. Nothing fancy, but nothing that screamed hospital janitor either. Maria's stepmother had spies everywhere. Dennis noticed them immediately. On the first day, there was a man in the cafeteria. He sat 3 tables away pretending to read a newspaper, but his eyes kept flicking toward Dennis and Maria. His phone was angled like he was taking photos. Dennis recognized the behavior. Surveillance. Amateur but effective. Dennis leaned close to Maria and told her about the man. Maria looked shocked. She had not noticed. Dennis explained that the man had been there for 40 minutes, but had not touched his coffee, that his newspaper was upside down, that he was wearing an earpiece disguised as a hearing aid. Maria asked Dennis how he knew all that. Dennis said he used to notice things for a living. He did not explain further. Maria did not push. On the second day, there was a woman pretending to be a nurse. She approached Dennis and Maria in the waiting room and asked questions, personal questions. How long had they known each other? Where did they meet? What did Dennis do for work? Maria answered smoothly. She said they met at a charity event 2 years ago, that Dennis worked in hospital operations, that they preferred to keep their relationship private. The fake nurse smiled and wrote everything down on a clipboard. Then she left. Dennis watched her walk straight past the nurse's station without stopping. She did not belong there. Dennis told Maria. Maria's hands started shaking. She asked Dennis what they should do. Dennis said they should stick to the story. Stay consistent. Act natural. But Maria was not good at acting natural. She was a CEO. She was used to controlling situations, used to having power. But here in the hospital, waiting for news about her son, she had no control. And it showed. Dennis started teaching her small things. How to hold his hand without gripping too tight. How to lean against him without looking stiff. How to smile at him like she had done it 1,000 times before. Maria was a fast learner. By the end of the second day, they looked like a real couple. Comfortable, familiar, tired but together. That night, Maria asked Dennis about his daughter, about why he was in the hospital. Dennis told her about Sophia, about the tests, about the fear that was eating him alive. Maria listened, really listened. Then she asked Dennis why a hospital janitor had surveillance training. Dennis was quiet for a long time. Then he told her the truth. Not all of it, but enough. He told Maria he used to work for the government, special operations, the kind of work that did not officially exist. He told her he was good at it, very good, but when his wife died, he walked away. He took Sophia and disappeared into the most ordinary life he could find. Maria asked why. Dennis said because his old life was dangerous, and Sophia deserved safety, deserved normal, deserved a father who came home every night. Maria said that being a hospital janitor must feel small after saving the world. Dennis said saving the world was easier than being a single father. Maria laughed, a real laugh, the first one Dennis had heard from her. She said she understood that running a billion-dollar company was easier than protecting a child from a predator. They sat together in silence after that, two people carrying weights no one else could see. On the third day, the stepmother made her move. She did not come herself. She sent the lawyer. The lawyer approached Dennis and Maria in the waiting room with a folder full of documents. He said he was conducting a routine background check. He asked Dennis for identification, for proof of marriage, for employment records. Dennis stayed calm. He pulled out his hospital ID badge. He said he worked in operations and maintenance. He said his marriage to Maria was registered in a private ceremony. He said all the documents were at home. The lawyer wrote everything down. Then he asked Dennis about his military record, about his time in special operations. Dennis's blood went cold. Someone had done deep research. Someone had found his old life. But Dennis did not flinch. He told the lawyer he served his country honorably, that his service record was sealed for national security reasons, that if the lawyer wanted access, he would need federal clearance. The lawyer's smile faded. He said he would be in touch. Then he left. Maria waited until the lawyer was gone. Then she asked Dennis how much trouble they were in. Dennis said a lot. The stepmother was not playing games. She had resources, investigators, money. She was building a case. Maria asked what they should do. Dennis said they needed to be smarter, faster, more careful. Then Dennis did something that surprised both of them. He said he would help Maria win, not just pretend to be her husband, actually help her fight. Maria asked why. Why would a janitor risk everything to help a stranger? Dennis looked at Maria, really looked at her. He saw a mother fighting for her child, the same fight he was fighting for Sophia. And he said, because someone should. Maria's eyes filled with tears. She squeezed Dennis's hand and said, "Thank you." Dennis nodded. The game had changed. The stepmother thought she was hunting a weak CEO and a nobody janitor. But she had no idea what Dennis really was, what he was capable of, and that would be her mistake. The crisis came on the fourth day. Dennis was in the basement changing out his janitor coveralls when his phone rang. It was Maria. Her voice was shaking. She told him to come to the pediatric wing immediately. Her stepmother was there with the lawyer and hospital administration. They had papers. Dennis ran. He did not bother changing clothes. He just threw on a clean shirt over his undershirt and headed upstairs. When he reached the waiting room, he saw Maria standing in front of 3 people: her stepmother, the lawyer, and the hospital's chief administrator. The stepmother was holding a folder. She was smiling, the kind of smile that meant she had won. The lawyer was explaining the situation to the administrator. He said they had evidence that Maria Schreiber was mentally unstable, that she was fabricating a marriage to appear stable, that her son needed to be removed from her care immediately for his own safety. The administrator looked uncomfortable. He did not want to be involved in a family dispute, but the lawyer was threatening legal action, threatening to sue the hospital if they did not comply, threatening to make it a public scandal. Maria was trying to argue, trying to explain, but her voice was shaking, and she looked like she was about to break. Dennis stepped in. He walked up to Maria and put his arm around her shoulders. He looked at the stepmother and the lawyer with calm eyes. He asked what the problem was. The lawyer repeated his claims. He said Dennis and Maria were not really married, that Dennis was just a hospital janitor Maria had recruited to play a role, that the whole thing was a desperate lie. Dennis asked if the lawyer had proof. The lawyer pulled out documents, background checks on Dennis, employment records showing he was a janitor, witness statements from hospital staff saying they had never seen Dennis and Maria together before 4 days ago. Dennis looked at the documents. Then he looked at the administrator. He told the administrator that everything the lawyer said was partially true. He was a janitor. He and Maria had kept their marriage private, but that did not make it fake. The stepmother laughed. She said it was obvious. A CEO and a janitor, a marriage no one knew about, a husband who appeared out of nowhere during a custody dispute. It was clearly a performance. Dennis stayed calm. He told the administrator he understood the skepticism, but he asked a simple question. If this was fake, why would Maria choose a janitor? Why not hire an actor? Why not find someone impressive? The lawyer said it was because Maria was desperate and stupid. Dennis smiled, not a friendly smile, the kind of smile that made people nervous. He said Maria was a lot of things, but stupid was not one of them. Then Dennis did something that shocked everyone. He told the administrator the truth. He told him about his background, his military service, his work in special operations, his classified record. The stepmother laughed again. She said Dennis was lying, making up stories to sound important. Dennis pulled out his phone. He made a call. He spoke quietly for 30 seconds. Then he handed the phone to the administrator. The administrator listened. His face went pale. He asked a few questions. Then he handed the phone back to Dennis and apologized. The stepmother demanded to know what was said. The administrator told her that Dennis's military record was real, that he had federal clearance, that his background had just been verified by someone very high up in the Department of Defense. The lawyer tried to recover. He said it did not matter, that the marriage was still fake, that they had no proof of a real relationship. Maria spoke up. She told him about the charity event where they met, about the private ceremony, about the reasons they kept it quiet. Her voice was steadier now, stronger, but the stepmother was not done. She pulled out her final card. She had medical documents, forged documents claiming Maria had a history of mental illness, documents requesting immediate psychiatric evaluation and temporary custody transfer. The administrator looked at the documents. He said they looked official. He said hospital policy required him to take them seriously. Dennis saw Maria's face go white. This was it, the moment the stepmother had been building toward. A legal trap that would take Maria's son away while she fought to prove the documents were fake. But Dennis had been preparing for this. He had spent 3 days learning the hospital systems, learning the layout, learning the security protocols, all the access that came with being a janitor. Dennis told the administrator to wait. He said he needed 5 minutes. The administrator hesitated. Dennis looked him in the eyes and said 5 minutes could save the hospital from a major lawsuit. The administrator agreed. 5 minutes. Dennis left. He went to the security office in the basement. He had mopped that office every night for 2 years. He knew the guard, knew the systems. He asked to review the lobby footage from the past week. The guard let him. Dennis found what he needed. Footage of the stepmother's investigators. Footage of them bribing hospital staff for information. Footage of them accessing restricted areas without authorization. Footage of them photographing patient records. Federal crimes. HIPAA violations. Evidence tampering. Dennis copied the footage to a drive. He went back upstairs. He showed it to the administrator. The administrator watched. His face went from pale to red. He told the stepmother and her lawyer to leave immediately. He said the hospital would be filing charges. He said Maria's son was staying exactly where he was. The stepmother tried to argue. The administrator called security. Dennis stood next to Maria and watched them leave. The stepmother's perfect plan destroyed by a janitor with access to security footage. When they were gone, Maria turned to Dennis. She was crying. She asked how he knew. Dennis said he had been watching, waiting, preparing, because that was what he did. That was who he was under coveralls. Maria hugged him, really hugged him, and Dennis realized he was not pretending anymore. The test results came back 2 hours after the stepmother left. Dennis was sitting with Maria in the waiting room when the doctor called his name. Not Maria's name, his name, because Sophia's results were ready. Dennis stood up. His legs felt weak. Maria grabbed his hand and asked if he wanted her to come with him. Dennis nodded. He could not do this alone. They walked into the doctor's office together. The doctor looked at Maria with confusion. Dennis introduced her as his wife. The doctor accepted it without question. The doctor told Dennis that Sophia had acute lymphoblastic leukemia, but it was caught early. The treatment plan was aggressive, but the prognosis was good. 85% survival rate with proper care. Dennis heard the words but could not process them. 85%. His daughter had an 85% chance of living. It should have felt like good news. But all Dennis could think about was the 15%, the chance he could still lose her. The doctor started talking about treatment costs, chemotherapy, hospital stays, medications. The numbers were enormous. Numbers Dennis could never afford on a janitor's salary. Maria spoke up. She told the doctor that cost was not an issue, that Sophia would receive the best care available, that everything would be covered. Dennis looked at Maria. He started to argue, started to say he could not accept that. But Maria squeezed his hand and told him to let her help. She said Sophia deserved the best chance. And Dennis had given Maria's son the best chance by protecting him from the stepmother. Dennis's throat was too tight to speak. He just nodded. The doctor said he would start setting up the treatment plan. Dennis and Maria left the office. They sat back down in the waiting room. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then Maria's phone rang. It was her son's doctor. Maria answered. Dennis watched her face change. Relief, joy, tears. She hung up and told Dennis the news. Her son's test came back clear. No cancer, just a benign growth that could be removed with simple surgery. Her son was going to be fine. Maria cried. Real tears. Not the careful tears of a CO trying to maintain composure. Just a mother's relief. Dennis put his arm around her and let her cry. When she stopped, Maria looked at Dennis. She said they did it. They survived. Both their children were going to be okay. Listen, if you've made it this far in the story, you're invested. You want to know what happens to them. But here's the thing. Most people scroll past these stories without subscribing. They watch, they enjoy, and they disappear. If this story matters to you, if you actually care how it ends, hit that subscribe button, please. It takes 2 seconds. And if you don't, you'll probably forget about this channel and never hear another amazing story from me. Dennis agreed. Then he said the hard part. He said the crisis was over. The stepmother was gone. Maria did not need a fake husband anymore. Maria was quiet. Then she said something Dennis did not expect. She said she did not want a fake husband. She wanted the real thing. Dennis stared at her. He thought she was joking, but her face was serious. Maria told Dennis she had spent 4 days with him. For days, watching him be calm under pressure. For days, watching him protect people he barely knew. For days, seeing the man behind the janitor coveralls. And she wanted more of those days. She told Dennis she did not care that he was a janitor. She did not care about the class difference or what people would think. She cared that he was good, that he was brave, that he stayed when everyone else would have run. Dennis told Maria she was emotional, that she was grateful, that it was not real. Maria said it was the most real thing she had felt in years. She asked Dennis what he wanted, really wanted. Dennis thought about it. He thought about the past 3 years of hiding, of being invisible, of convincing himself he did not deserve more than survival. He looked at Maria, at this woman who saw past his coveralls and his calloused hands and his ordinary face, who saw the person he used to be and the person he could still become. Dennis told Maria the truth. He said he wanted to stop hiding. He wanted to be seen. He wanted someone who understood what it meant to fight for the people you love. Maria smiled. She said that was what she wanted too. 6 months later, Dennis no longer worked as a janitor. Maria had offered him a job running security for her company. Dennis had hesitated, but Maria reminded him that protecting people was what he did best, and her company needed someone who could think like an operative and act like a ghost. Dennis accepted. He was good at the job. Better than good. He found threats Maria's previous security team had missed. He built systems that kept her company and her son safe. Sophia started treatment. The chemotherapy was hard. There were bad days. Days when Dennis sat beside her hospital bed and wondered if 85% would be enough. But Maria was there. Every appointment, every treatment, every bad day. She showed up like she had promised. Maria's stepmother tried one more legal challenge. But Dennis had documented everything. Every spy, every forged document, every HIPAA violation. The stepmother's lawyer advised her to drop it. She did. 1 year after they met in that hospital waiting room, Dennis and Maria got married. For real this time. A small ceremony with just close friends and family. Sophia was a flower girl. Maria's son was the ring bearer. Both children were healthy. Both children were loved. Dennis stood at the altar and looked at Maria. He remembered the desperate woman in the red dress who had grabbed his hand and begged him to lie. And he realized she had not been asking him to pretend. She had been asking him to be brave enough to be seen. The lie had become the truth. The fake marriage had become real. An invisible janitor had finally allowed himself to exist. Dennis spent 3 years trying to be invisible because he believed he did not deserve more than survival. But hiding yourself does not protect you. It just makes you small. The truth is that everyone carries things no one else sees. Everyone has a version of themselves they keep buried because they are afraid or ashamed or convinced the world will not accept them. But being seen by the right person changes everything. It reminds you that you are more than your worst days, more than your mistakes, more than the safe, small life you built to avoid more pain. Some of you are not just listening to this story. You are remembering parts of your own life. You worked long hours. You came home tired and tried to hold the house together, believing there would always be time later for conversations. Then one day you realize children grow up quietly and some chances don't come back. Many of you have also seen things you never really spoke about. People you expected to grow old beside are gone, and life simply kept moving while you carried it privately. You showed up. You provided. You stayed. That matters more than you were ever told. I put together a small book about fathers and children, the distance that sometimes forms, and the small things that can still change how the relationship turns out over time. If it feels like something you want to look at, the link is in the description. So here's the real question. Did you subscribe yet? Thousands of people will listen to this story and won't subscribe. Please don't be that person. Please subscribe to this channel, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. And here's what I need to know. Do you want part 2?